It began like a scene ripped straight from a Hollywood thriller, a daring jailbreak, a city on edge, and a fugitive who refused to be caught. For months, the name Derek Groves sent a chill through New Orleans, a convicted double murderer who vanished into thin air along with 9 other inmates from the Orleans Parish Jail. What started as confusion soon spiraled into one of the most shocking manhunts Louisiana had ever seen. On that humid May morning, no one could have guessed what was about to unfold. The day began quietly inside the walls of the parish jail, but within hours chaos erupted. 10 inmates slipped through the cracks, taking advantage of what investigators later described as a catastrophic security failure. Guards didn't even notice right away. By the time they did, the prisoners were gone, leaving behind only laughter, graffiti, and one haunting message scrawled across the wall: "Too easy." That phrase would echo through the halls of law enforcement offices for weeks. It was a taunt, a challenge, and a symbol of humiliation for a jail that had already been criticized for poor security. Cameras weren't working in key areas. Door locks were faulty. Alarms didn't sound. The escape was as simple as walking out the door, and the inmates knew it. Among the 10 escapees, one name stood out: Derek Groves. He wasn't just another inmate. Groves was serving multiple life sentences for 2 brutal murders that had already left the city shaken years before. To the public, he was a monster, and now he was loose. The New Orleans district attorney called an emergency press conference. His message was clear: the city wouldn't rest until every last one of the fugitives was captured. "Everyone is sighing a collective sigh of relief," he would later say, but at that time, there was no relief in sight. In the early days after the escape, arrests came one by one. Police caught 2 fugitives within a week, hiding in abandoned houses. 3 more were found near Baton Rouge after the tip from a convenience store clerk who recognized them. But as the weeks dragged on, the remaining fugitives grew harder to find. Some left Louisiana altogether. Others went underground, blending into small towns, relying on old contacts to survive. But Derek Groves, he vanished completely. It was as if the earth had swallowed him. Behind the scenes, the U.S. Marshal Service took over the case, forming a multi-agency task force. They combed through cell phone records, interviewed relatives, and traced every possible lead. Months passed. Summer turned into fall, and public pressure mounted. How could the most dangerous man in New Orleans just disappear? Then, a faint signal, a clue so small it might have been missed if not for persistence. In early October, investigators traced a phone call linked to a known associate of Groves. The call had been placed from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia, hundreds of miles away. At first, the tip seemed like another dead end, but surveillance footage from a nearby gas station changed everything. A man matching Grove's description had been seen fueling up a beat-up sedan, his hair shorter, his beard gone, but the eyes unmistakable. The marshals moved quickly. Within 48 hours, they had tracked the car to a quiet neighborhood in Clayton County, south of Atlanta. It was a modest single-story home with boarded windows, the kind of place neighbors barely noticed. But inside, hiding beneath the floorboards, was one of America's most wanted men. At dawn, the task force surrounded the property. Helicopters circled overhead. Officers shouted command through loudspeakers, ordering Groves to surrender. But there was silence. Then a noise, a faint thump from inside. They knew he was there. To flush him out, officers deployed gas canisters, filling the house with smoke and chemical irritant. Moments later, movement, footsteps in the dark. Groves had moved into the basement. The standoff had begun. For over an hour, negotiators called out his name, urging him to come out peacefully. But Groves refused. That's when the Clayton County K-9 unit was sent in. The dog crept into the crawl space, guided by flashlight beams cutting through the dust. Then came the bark, sharp, insistent. Officers rushed in. There, wedged between concrete and pipes, was Derek Groves, the fugitive who had mocked the justice system, who had boasted of freedom with the words, "too easy," was finally cornered. He resisted briefly, but there was nowhere left to run. Officers pulled him out, handcuffed and coughing from the gas. The manhunt was over. As news broke, New Orleans breathed again. Months of tension gave way to relief. Across the city, residents watched the footage of Groves being escorted into custody, his head down, his defiance gone. After everything, the murders, the escape, The chase, the story ended not with a gunfight or a dramatic shootout, but in a crawl space beneath a stranger's home. For law enforcement, the capture was a triumph, the final piece of a long and exhausting puzzle. For the public, it was justice at last. But for officials overseeing the jail, it was a wake-up call. The sheriff herself admitted that the facility's locks and doors were still being replaced months after the escape. The investigation revealed systemic negligence, broken locks, malfunctioning alarms, and a lack of staff training. It was a security disaster years in the making. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana's Attorney General Liz Morrill issued a statement within hours of the capture. Convicted murderer Derek Groves has finally been recaptured in Atlanta after a brief standoff, she wrote. He now faces additional charges for his role in the escape, and I will ensure that he is prosecuted to the full extent of the law. She praised the detectives and U.S. Marshals who had worked for months tracking Groves across state lines, calling it a team effort born out of relentless determination. Back in New Orleans, the district attorney echoed that sentiment. This city can finally breathe a collective sigh of relief, he said. A man facing multiple life sentences is back where he belongs, behind bars. But even as the words offered comfort, they carried a warning. The jailbreak had exposed deep cracks in the system, cracks that criminals had exploited with ease. In the weeks following Groves' recapture, the Louisiana Bureau of Investigation launched a full audit of the Orleans Parish Jail. Teams analyzed every door, every lock, every camera feed. They wanted answers. How could 10 inmates, including convicted murderer, walk out of a high-security facility without anyone noticing? The findings were damning. Some security systems hadn't been updated in years. Staff shortages led to corners being cut, and morale inside the jail was at an all-time low. For Groves, the story is far from over. He now faces new charges, including escape, obstruction, and resisting arrest, on top of his existing life sentences. Prosecutors plan to use his case as an example of what happens when the system fails and when justice refuses to give up. In Atlanta, neighbors near the house where Groves was found said they had no idea who he was. He kept to himself, one resident told reporters. We'd see him take out the trash, but he never talked to anyone. Authorities believe he was living under a fake name, supported by a small network of people connected to the Louisiana underworld. The man who once laughed at the law had spent his final days hiding in shadows, paranoid and isolated. When the gas canisters rolled in, the illusion of freedom ended. For the task force, it was a culmination of months of long nights, false leads, and dead ends. Officers described the operation as methodical and patient. Every clue mattered, every movement tracked. In the end, it was persistence, not luck, that brought Groves down. Today, the Orleans Parish Jail stands as both a warning and a reminder. New locks have been installed. Extra security cameras watch every hallway. And still, the graffiti remains, a faint trace of the words "too easy" etched into the concrete, a scar from a moment the city will never forget. For the people of New Orleans, justice took time, but it came. The laughter of those who mocked the system has gone silent. The man who believed he could outrun the law has been proven wrong. And as Derek Groves sits once again behind the same kind of bars he once escaped, the echoes of that failed jailbreak fade into history, not as a triumph of crime, but as a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice. Because in the end, no matter how far you run or how deep you hide, the truth always catches up. And for Derek Groves, it finally did.